The museum of why didn't he just say that? Conceptual art is entirely word-bound. It is, in fact, the kind of art that is exhausted in its description. Alexander Stoddard. There are so many ways of thinking about art that I am told that the only incorrect way to think about art is to think that there is anything definitive to think about art at all. I'm skeptical. Perhaps, though, less controversially, we can begin by agreeing that a purely conceptual work of art, let's say a conceptual piece of music, could be entirely encapsulated in words, in the words that describe with accuracy the concept that the music in this case is meant to deliver. Pure conceptual art turns the medium into a kind of oddball carrier pigeon, and the art critic into the page of noble birth who, unfurling a comically small scroll, translates to read aloud, "Hear ye what this imposing work of art doth properly mean. Attend ye unto me." One idea I had when I started working on this podcast was to write an episode called The Museum of Why Didn't He Just Say That? I'm making good. The idea comes from the high school complaint that after reading, for example, The Hollow Man, the whole poem is tidily and correctly summarized by a teacher who properly demystifies the thing. Yes, it is unnecessarily overcomplicated, but ultimately translatable into brief and accessible terms. The question follows: if the whole poem were just the vehicle to arrive at this much more straightforwardly worded summary, then why didn't he just say that? Thus the museum. To this incisive query is dedicated the capstone of our newly founded forum. I imagine Dewy Decimal-like, a system of drawers containing innumerable smallish cue cards, cards dedicated each to a single work of art in a museum large enough to store all the historical artworks of the species. On each card, artist, date, title, and most importantly, blurb. Something said meant to encompass everything. The Museum of Why Didn't He Just Say That asks you, why bother to listen to Sgt. Pepper's when you can read, in the comfort of our well-furnished museum, no smoking please, the tidy totality of its meaning on bitty cardstock. Sticking with our high school theme, you'll find this classic entry in a rather large section pithily titled, "It's About Drugs," though often you'll find it's not. The question this mammoth of a museum really raises, though, is, even if we could, with accuracy, describe every work in history, wouldn't something enormous still be missing from its enormity? Something entirely absent from this vast vault of conceptual knowledge? Of course, what would be conspicuously missing would be our knowledge of art in experience. At length, languishing in the fully furnished non-smoking section, we might begin to feel deprived or even famished, alone with our cue cards, ourselves too much like diners reading well-written descriptions of Michelin-starred meals on a menu where no waiter serves, no cook toils, nothing boils behind the scene, and nothing comes forth. We would soon tire, not stuffed heads filled with straw, but hungry mouths fed with words, and by such words unsatisfied. We want in our experience the substance of something, and not merely a wordy description of what that something is. We can weary of concept, and concept is not direct experience. I should say I'm not anti-conceptual art. I describe an extreme. I have a preference, but I don't like a manifesto. Why should I confuse my own defensible taste with a prescriptive motto that presumptively saddles a larger populace? I am of one species, you perhaps another. But I do share my own perspectives in as much as it may help you understand me, clarify the kinds of questions I pursue. For myself, I'm inclined to like people who ask questions about music and art generally, like, does it work? I like that. I like statements like breaking the rules in a way that works. I want to talk at length in another episode about those kinds of statements. But for the moment, I think we see right away that they prioritize something other than whether a piece should or should not work by certain definite rules we easily control. They prioritize, rather, whether something does work, a defiantly vague test, in inner experience when apprehended in its totality. To me, music doesn't seem to be primarily a conceptual message like Morse code conveys, where the direct experience of pitch and tapped-out rhythm are necessary incidentals to discard, where a final statement about the music could ever stand in for the music. We don't have to insist on the other extreme, exiling concept and language completely from the scene. But if you'll accept that music is most what it is when it is what it seems to be in inner experience, then I think we have a starting point, a real beginning for the kinds of questions about subjectivity and about objectivity, about reality, illusion, and physicalism and consciousness that this podcast pursues. Let's begin at the very beginning. A very good place to start. But let's start here, somewhere further in, we said, than objectivity, and other than concept. Far from the museum, here, before solfège do. Indeed, prior to anything we can put into words. The person you see in the mirror is the person you are, who touches his face left and right like he can remember, like he can find a scar, can locate that person who was so afraid that the clay was too broken to be remade. Where are the scene lines, the tracework of glue? He's been worn whole. He looks like someone new. Someone improbable who is probably